We're back on Open Line, everyone. Tim Wise is our guest joining us tonight as we dive into the topic of critical race theory and whether or not it should be taught in Tennessee schools. It is a hot-button political issue now, which we will talk about in just a moment. I want to pick up on where we left off, talking about the founding fathers and how the country was founded. I personally still believe these were brilliant men, and you were talking about Andrew Jackson, and in the South at the time, and we have to dive into slavery because I feel like it's just one of those things that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and yet it's such a key part of our history. We know it happened, and the founding fathers, the way I try to describe it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, yeah, they did. They were slave owners, and they were men and women. They were the only ones running things. But for thousands of years, slavery was kind of accepted all around the world. All around the world. It's terrible. We know now as a progressive society but it's still going on in some countries. How do we balance the brilliance of our framers, that they were able to set up a framework for this country, knowing things are going to change, but here's a framework to start. How do we balance that with the people who they were, and even then probably there were people who were against it. In their minds, Tim, they really thought, oh, this is fine because we're superior.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. First, okay. Yes, slavery has existed from time immemorial, but we cannot use that fact as a society to sort of shrug off our responsibility to deal with the legacy of what happened here. That's sort of like when you're a kid, if you're playing ball with your buddy and you break a window and you tell your mother, well, don't punish me, Billy broke the window too. As I recall, my mother said something about Billy being a fool, and if he were to jump off a bridge, would I follow him, or something to that effect. Right? So we can't use that as an out. Yes, it's true, but slavery in this country has had a particular legacy that we inherit, and a history, and not just enslavement, but segregation as well, which lasted up until roughly the beginning of my life a half a century ago. And so that's number one. Number two, if we are going to reap the legacy of the framers that we like, the good part of that, then we have to address the downside. Our problem as a country is we want to take advantage of all the bounty of that founding and all the good things in our history while sort of pushing the bad stuff into a memory hole. The reality is the founders, let's be very clear, the original founders did not set up a constitutional framework that was inevitably going to create freedom for everyone. That required a civil war and the loss of 600,000 lives for the new framers of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to create even the formal equal opportunity that we then theoretically had after that. So the framers would have been perfectly comfortable with a white man's republic. They had no intention of ever seeing the abolition of enslavement as far as they were concerned. They had no intention of equal opportunity. That's why we had to amend the Constitution to fix their mistake. And yet when you say that, people will accuse you of, bashing the framers or saying, for instance, well, you can't judge them by today's standards. But listen, the 10 Commandments were ostensibly handed down to Moses a long time ago, and they said, thou shalt not steal or kill. The system of enslavement involved both theft and murder. So I think that predates the 1600s and 1700s by an awful lot. We have ancient moral standards that tell us it was wrong, even if there were people who practiced it all through that time. So we need to have a fixed moral compass. And I think sometimes we conveniently sort of move the goalposts to justify that which really can't be justified.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the amendments, because I've also heard people argue saying, those on the left or whoever want to change the Constitution. And I say to them, we have changed the Constitution. They're called amendments. That is
that's why we amended it.
That's why we have, where we've thought maybe slavery isn't a good, or maybe we should give women the right to vote, or maybe, and on and on and on, that we've done as we have progressed as a society. So we want to talk a little more about how we hope to progress even more. by addressing these issues in our schools. First, I do want to take one call first because I don't want our callers to get impatient. Ron is on line one. Hey, Ron, thanks for calling in.
Hello?
Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, I may be off topic here a little bit. I don't know.
Okay.
From what I'm seeing with it, I'm seeing more. It's like liberals and Democrats. Nothing against anybody. Love everybody. Seem to be wanting diversity. But if I say I'm conservative, I'm called a racist.
Racist, yeah.
You know, that's not right. Why are we throwing that in on somebody that's, hey, man, I love everybody. I've got colored friends. I've got Spanish friends. You know, it's not right. I think we're using a kind of a little agenda. Everybody needs to watch Morgan Freeman, what he says about what I understood systemic racism. Fella asked him, you know, was he held down? He said, look at me now. I'm rich. He's a colored guy, obviously. He made his way. Everybody's got to make their own way through life.
But Ron, and let me just ask this, and you know, not to challenge you a little bit on that, but just the term colored that you use. You understand a lot of people of color, they're offended by that.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps.
Yes, sir.
And when I went in the Marine Corps, the first thing our drill instructor said, I had 4 colored black drill instructors, whatever you don't call them. They were people of color.
Okay.
I had 4 and 1 white. You know who I preferred to have out of all of them? Was the colored. The white drill instructor was, it didn't work.
Okay.
So, you know, and I was taught there's no white and black. It's light green and dark green.
Well, thank you for calling in, and thanks for your service.
Hey, thank you. Y'all have a good night.
All right. So the point of that is being conservative, he feels a little under attack.
Well, and that's, you know, and those of us who are on the left feel under attack also by state lawmakers who want to ban the teaching of these issues in schools as an attack on us. So I guess everybody can feel aggrieved if we wish, but here's the point. Of course, not everyone who's conservative is a racist in any like formal bigoted sense. But here is the problem. When you say, as Ron did, and I think he meant well when he said it, that everybody has to make their own way, and then he referenced Morgan Freeman. Let's be very clear. Morgan Freeman does not deny the existence of racism in this country. Morgan Freeman does not deny the existence of systemic racism in this country. The fact that he is a wealthy man does not change the reality of racism. Let's remember, the first black millionaire in this country was Madam C.J. Walker. She became a millionaire selling cosmetic products, beauty products for black women that white cosmetics firms didn't see the need to manufacture. But let's remember, she became a millionaire in 1911, which on balance was a pretty bad year to be black in the United States. So it wouldn't do to say, well, you know, Madam C.J. Walker made it, so why can't they all make it? Well, that year, there were quite a few black folks being lynched like every week in this country. So obviously, the fact that individuals can sometimes still succeed against great odds is fantastic. Those are great stories, and we ought to learn those stories. But it doesn't mean that racism is gone. Just like some people will say, well, Obama was president, how can we have racism? Well, Benazir Bhutto, a woman, became the head of state in Pakistan, but no one in their right mind is going to say that sexism no longer exists in Pakistan just because they had a female head of state. We have to look at systems and overall distributions of opportunity, not just individuals who have been successful.
Why? All right, in all your years, as you just, you know, I'm sure you've seen a lot of light bulb moments with people, you know, the whole, wow, I never really thought of it that way kind of moment, which is a great thing to see as people kind of accept new ideas. Do you think that, quote unquote, good white people out there, well-meaning, just avoid the discussion because they're afraid of being labeled racist if they say the wrong thing? You know, how do we get people to open up and talk?
Well, I actually talk about this a lot in my work. There is research on that, and the studies do find that one of the things that keeps white people from engaging the topic is exactly what you identified, this fear that, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing and these folks are going to think I'm racist, so I'd just rather not say anything at all. But here's what's ironic about that tendency. There's a whole nother bunch of research. There was a study from Northwestern University in Chicago about 10 years ago, which found that the one thing that white folks do that most convinces black people that we might be racist is when we shut down and don't talk about it. So the irony is, by not talking about it, we think we're going to avoid judgment, but that actually makes black folks look at us and go, I wonder if maybe the reason you're not talking about it is actually because you have something to hide, which means we'd be better off to just take a chance, right? To just have the conversation. And yeah, you're probably going to make a mistake sometimes. You're probably going to say something you shouldn't say. You're probably, like Ron called and, he used the term colored, which is, is considered offensive because it is a term white folks put on black and brown people. They did not choose it for themselves originally, but I'm sure he didn't mean ill by it. I'm sure he's not a bad guy, right? He just uses this term because it's sort of what he's used to. And so I'm glad that he at least called in and shared his opinion, but we would be better off to have to take that chance, to have those moments, maybe say something that rubs somebody the wrong way, let them correct us, and then next time we do better. That's what adults do, right? That's what big people do, and we would be better off to do that. Now, as far as aha moments, I'll tell you that the one thing in my experience that is the biggest aha moment, I bring it up a lot. I think that when white Americans in 2021 deny the problem of racism as an ongoing reality, although I disagree with them, I get it. There's been certain amounts of progress. I get it. You may not see it. But here's what's interesting to me. If you were to ask any of those white folks, including very conservative white Americans, hey, do you think that, we had a problem with discrimination, let's say 60 years ago? I'm pretty sure everybody would acknowledge the answer to that is yes, that was before civil rights laws. But what's interesting is if you go back and you look at the polling data from those years, 1961, 62, 63, before the civil rights laws were on the books, and when the movement was in full swing, 2 out of 3 or even 3 out of 4 white people, when asked, said there wasn't really a problem, that we didn't need the sit-ins, we didn't need the freedom rides, we didn't need civil rights laws, because black people in their mind, even in the early 60s, were already treated equally. What does it say that otherwise decent people, because I think most of those white folks were good folks, people like my grandparents, my mom's parents, were good people, but they just didn't see it, even though it was right in front of them. In retrospect, we can look at that and go, my God, how could they have missed it? But that's the point. When you're the dominant group, you don't have to know what other people are experiencing. And as a result of not having to know it, you get to remain oblivious to it. And then when they bring it up, you say, oh, you're exaggerating, or you're playing a race card. See, we've done this for a long time. And so I think what it tells me is that if white Americans missed it, even 60 years ago, couldn't see the problem that we now can all see, what does that mean? It means that maybe white folks are still missing it. And I think if we have to trust somebody's judgment, I'm going to be more inclined to trust black folks' judgment on what their life experience is, rather than trust my own judgment as to what their life experience is.
Take a break. On that note, more calls right after this on Open Line. Stay with us.